You're watching The New Americans Unrestricted. This is your host, Christian Gomez, and today we're joined by Lucy Biggers, a journalist with the Free Press. So, Lucy, thank you so much for joining us here at The New American today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. So you recently wrote this article on the Free Press back on June 30th titled, "I helped AOC win. I understand the fantasy Zohran is selling." So the article's gone viral, as has your story. And so can you tell us a little bit about how is it that you met AOC? You know, what led you to that meeting? And also, what is it at the time that led you to hitting things off with her, so to speak?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I'm 35. I'm actually the same age as AOC. So about 8 years ago, whenever it was, she was running for office. So 2017. We were 27, and I met her because it was right after Trump had gotten elected, and the Democrats had a shellacking, the first one. We've had another election since then with similar results, but anyway, they lost the House and the Senate, and so I'm in Soho, New York, and I got invited to a party that was for unknown Democratic candidates who were going to run for office, a lot of them primarying more moderate Democrats. The idea being, let's take back the House from all the Republicans. And at that party, I met AOC, who is a complete unknown at that time. She was a Bernie organizer, essentially, or she was a previous Bernie organizer. And then I met also Alyssa Slotkin at that same party. She's now a senator, a junior senator from, I should know this, but I want to say Michigan. So anyway, there was a few people there that now are household names. And so I got AOC's contact information. I invited her to come to the Now This studios. She came about 2 months later. I interviewed her for an hour on camera, and that video ended up being cut down to, like 3 minutes or whatever for social media. And I really liked her because at the time I was also very, very left wing. And I'm like the Obama millennial. Like we were just like, that's what our generation was. We were just very liberal, and then it was Bernie, and I was Bernie. And then she just talked about the stuff that at that time I was really bought into, and she came off really super authentic. A lot of parallels, I think, between her charisma and why she breaks through in the same way that Mamdani does. Like they're sort of like media darlings. People just want to write about them all the time. And so, yeah, that's how I knew her. And then I met her a few times over the years.
So, you and I both share this about the same age, 35, 36 in my case. So I was right there, with you, not in the same college, obviously, but in different colleges, but the same experiences sort of. We saw the rise of Barack Obama, the
Right.
liberalism of that time. And of course, many people who loved Obama also loved Bernie Sanders. But would you say that you were always a pretty political person, even as a child or a teenager, or did that come on later in life? What got sparked the interest in politics for you to begin with?
Yeah, I've always found politics to be very interesting. I was a political science and history double major at Tulane, where I graduated from in 2012. I just find it to be interesting. I think it's just something that I kind of follow. I love the psychology of it and the policies, and it's something I like to talk about. And it's so funny because it was like my parents were George Bush Republicans. And then, by the time George Bush was leaving, he was so unpopular. And I think people forget that. That's why the millennials were so left, because they were just so frustrated with George Bush. So I was like I was in the Young Republicans Club as a freshman in high school because I hadn't really like examined my beliefs. Ironically, now I'm like going back to a lot of those beliefs. But so I was a Young Republicans Club. Then, 2008, I think Obama just won over so many people with his hope and change and his really smooth marketing and his oration and his promise of free healthcare and all these things. And I just fell for that because I just wanted, to solve all these problems. You want people to have affordable healthcare. You want there to be less income inequality. But, I had a friend at the time who was more conservative, and he said to me, "Lucy, when has the government ever done anything and run it well? Why would you want to give them more money?" And it was just one of those ideas that sort of sticks with you. And now looking back, I'm like, you're so right. Like, I get why young people fall for this socialism light, you could call it, because they see problems in the world and they want to fix it, and a catchy slogan and a pretty face, whether it's Obama or Mamdani or AOC. It's really easy to go there. And when the policies don't work and make the problems worse, you have young people who've moved on to the next catchy thing, and they don't even realize that they voted for really bad ideas.
So what do you attribute to the change that led you from going from more Republican leaning in high school to
Yeah.
a Barack Obama supporter, because clearly, Obama wasn't the only candidate in 2008, right? There was John McCain, although some argue that really wasn't much of a choice, but
Right.
he had John McCain and then other Republicans in the primary like Ron Paul and so forth. So why go from liking Bush to liking Barack Obama? Did something happen in college that made
Well,
you go that direction?
when I like Bush, I was like in ninth grade. So I don't think I really like had really like formed my beliefs. It was just sort of what my parents supported. And then I really went for Obama because of all the reasons that I stated. And also, like, we were coming off of Iraq and Afghanistan wars, and there was a huge economic crisis. So that was like an easy one. And then I was always in the middle because I then went for Romney. I voted for Romney, Obama's second term. And I was actually living in Mississippi at that time. And so I've always been open to changing my views in politics. And I never really went full left until it was like what we've seen since 2015 in reaction to Trump was that the left went very, very left. And it was not just like the Democrats of our childhood. It became a lot more about identity politics and like the cultural Marxism of this oppressed versus oppressor mindset. And I was really indoctrinated into that more because I worked in a newsroom in my 20s where that was the culture of the newsroom. And I say now, it's like I wasn't really inoculated against some of those more far left destructive ideas that are very anti-American and very don't work. They're very dangerous ideas. I was not really inoculated against that because I didn't even know to be looking out for it. And so that was my most biggest, like, I guess, zig and zag politically was when I was very left from like 2015 until I left my job in 2021, which was coinciding with COVID. And then I had my first son in 2022. And so that's always a moderating effect.
So what is it that kind of turned you from going from being left leaning or
Yeah.
far left to then going Trump? I mean that or
Yeah.
conservative Republican, like
Right.
that's kind of a big shift. I mean,
I
so
feel
how
like
do you
now I
attribute
don't,
that
yeah.
change?
Yeah, I think now I'm still pretty center moderate and like I don't really I don't say like I'm Republican, but I do have a lot of like like I feel like I'm conservative, like small c, if that makes sense. I think that what happened for me was like a lot of people, I think, living through COVID and seeing a lot of the media misinformation around COVID. I was a very big climate activist. I don't know if you like know that about my story from seeing my videos, but like I pushed like the Green New Deal and, going plastic free and all this ideology. And so, living through COVID and all of a sudden seeing, plastic was everywhere, right? We have all the personal plastic, what was it called? The PPE, personal protective equipment was all plastic, and I had been, killing myself over using a plastic straw for 5 years. So that was sort of a moment where I was like, what am I doing? Like, I think if I never use a plastic straw again, like everyone here is using more plastic in a day than I will in my entire life. So that kind of let me go of that idea because I guilted myself so much. So I let go of that ideology. And then also seeing the emissions going down during the pandemic, and they went down what, like 5%. I don't know if you remember that at all, but like when the whole world stopped, we like saw our emissions, it was like down. And I'm like, okay, if the climate movement is asking us to get to net zero by 2050 or whatever silly thing they try to do, what do they want us to do? Because right now the entire economy's shut down and there's no emissions going down. So like my awakening was really leaving that like very indoctrinated climate movement. And then, it's like a domino effect where it's when you start to examine your beliefs, it's like you just keep examining them. And so I had a lot of very leftist beliefs that I mentioned before around like what they call cultural Marxism of like, oh, you're white privilege. Like I literally was like, oh, I'm white privilege. I can't say this. I can't say that. Or I'm cisgender. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in a very left space, but there's this whole like
Well,
way
I
that
am
it
from Brooklyn.
works. Yeah, so you get it. Yeah, so just leaving, I think it's just, the rubber hits the road. You have kids too, and you're kind of like, wait, my ideology that I'm carrying around with me is like this weight around my neck. I feel horrible for being white. I feel horrible for being an American. I feel horrible for the climate. And then ultimately you're like, what am I even doing? Like this ideology like sucks. Seriously, like, so I don't know, you just grow up, you have to start to look at what really works and also how is your ideology fitting into your life. And it's not like I was being any more effective as a champion of these ideologies. I really was just carrying around a lot of guilt and shame and unable to be productive in the way that I wanted to be because of that, if that makes sense.
So it sounds like you weren't really motivated to be to have those views. You sort of felt guilted and shamed into you should accept
Yes,
this because of your ancestry and yada yada yada. Capitalism is evil,
exactly.
whiteness is evil. So therefore, accept these viewpoints to redeem yourselves in the eyes of the liberal space you were surrounded by.
Ding, ding, ding. That is the nail on the head. Exactly what it was. It was a motivation to be good and be perceived as good from the group. And so I adopted all of the ideologies of the group to be an ally and a good member of the group, like you're saying, like atoning for my privileges. And because I was born privileged, because of my ancestors, this is the ideology I can adopt to, like you're saying, make up for my sins of my birth, which now I feel like it's just such a destructive mindset.
Yeah, it like you've said already in this interview, it's cultural Marxism.
Yeah,
They gear the narrative to push you to accept Marxist views, although you don't at first you may not realize that. And it's funny that you
right.
use that phrase, actually, cultural Marxism, because a lot of people from our generation, like millennials, don't go around saying cultural Marxism.
I know.
So that's been part of your awakening, and so it's nice, it's refreshing to hear someone from our age and
Right.
generation. Acknowledge and realize that that's what this is, that the left
It's
is pushing.
exactly. And that's the thing that like sometimes I hear myself and I'm like, God, if I was still on the left, I'd be like, what is this girl on about? Like, you're so paranoid, right? But then once you leave it and you start to have discernment and you have better understanding of how these systems work, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't unsee what happened to me, which I was indoctrinated into this. And like, again, no one put a gun to my head and told me to believe these things. I never even got like publicly shamed or told to sit down and shut up and accept it. It was just being a perceptive person and being in a leftist environment, you take it on to be accepted by the group. And there's this spiral of silence. And I talk about this on my social media in some videos that I've made, that like when I was working in this very left wing newsroom, we had Slack, which is a messaging system that we all use. And because of that, it's sort of the town square of the newsroom. And so you start to see what is allowed because of who they're sharing that got canceled that day on Twitter. And this is when like public cancellations were happening a lot. And so you self censor. And I just completely took away any internal discernment and just gave it up to the group. And again, it's like I'm not some victim, but I feel like my story actually happens to so many people. And that is why I feel so empowered, or that's why I feel so motivated to speak out and speak from my perspective, because it's not like I was canceled and traumatized and like something bad happened. It was much more subtle, and yet I lived for years not living in integrity and in truth because I just was more interested in being accepted from the group. And now that I work at the Free Press, that's the entire founding of the company. I'm not sure if you know our story, but that's basically Barry Weiss founded the Free Press because she saw this same trend happening in all the newsrooms where she was at the New York Times and this ideology was there. And so now I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I believe? And let me figure that out for myself. And then it comes back to just smaller governments, less regulation, like going back to the policies that maybe don't make you feel so good. Like, yeah, we should close the borders because it actually is better than when I was on the left. It was like open borders because no human is illegal. And it was very emotional. And
Yes.
so now I'm like, I'm the bad guy. Sure. If you think I'm evil, like go for it. Because I would have thought I was evil back in the day.
Yeah, in your article, my favorite sentence, because I do have a favorite sentence from
Oh,
your article, actually.
thank you.
It's the one that says, "We need less government in our lives, less regulation, and lower taxes, so that individuals can flourish and create capital and prosperity." Wow, coming from someone that was born, in 1989 or 1990, around there, that's not something you see every day, especially from the Northeast. So, huge kudos to you for
Thank you
making
so
that
much.
awakening.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. I think that was like near the end of my piece, and they're like, you gotta wrap this up. And I'm like, all right, guys, we need less of this. We need less of that. Like we just need, because it's like you live long enough and you start to realize like we demonize the left used to, when I was in the left, I would demonize millionaires and say these pesky millionaires, these capitalists. And it's like, no, no, no. We have it backwards. If you're a millionaire, barring maybe the Nepo babies out there, there's an exception to every rule, but millionaires are hardworking, high productive, creative, high achieving people, right? So the idea that we should like label them with this millionaire negativity when really you should see them as job creators and the most effective people in our economy that are creating jobs, creating opportunity, creating capital, like I said. And, there's so much research out there that when you raise taxes on these people, they leave, or you're just getting less taxes overall because you're not able to create the businesses and all the things that lead to even bigger tax base. So we're already just so taxed in New York City. And that's what I was also trying to explain to people is like, we already have so much money. Like, why are we trying to throw more money at a system that does not work? And one of my favorite stats around New York City is that it's a $112 billion budget, which is insane, more than many European countries. We spend $40,000 per student to educate them in the public school system, and half of fourth graders do not read at grade level. So why, like $40,000 is how much is a cost of a very high end private school. And then all the leftists think, oh, we just need to spend more money. I'm like, we're spending a lot of money, guys. Like, it's not, money's not the problem. It's how it's spent, and this bureaucracy and kleptocracy and just corruption that we see from our government. So
Absolutely. I mean, you have children that are being homeschooled through homeschooling organizations and homeschools and curricula that's far
yeah.
cheaper.
Oh yeah.
And kids, and these are not kids who don't know how to add or read and write. Those are the government schooled kids.
Right.
A lot of kids who are homeschooled tend to outperform their peers
yeah.
of their same age when it comes to entry exams and other statewide exams that are used as a metric for how well students are educated.
It's ridiculous. And I think the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that was the point of my piece. It's like, guys, I get it. Like, it's so enticing. You see the world. You don't like that it's, you see the world, you see inequality, you see poverty. It makes you so sad. But ultimately, like, throwing more money at something that doesn't work is not the way.
Absolutely. And going back to that sentence of yours that I love so much about needing less government and less regulation in our lives and having more capital so we could prosper and so forth, that actually aligns perfectly with the mission statement of the New Americans parent organization, which is the John Birch Society, founded in 1958. And our mission statement says, less government, more responsibility, and with God's help, a better world. And that's what we're all about here at the New American and at the John Birch Society. And, in fulfilling you mentioned the founder of the Free Press and everything that she saw in the different newsrooms, which led her to create this alternative that you work for. Robert Welch, the founder of the John Birch Society, he was involved in politics before he founded the John Birch Society. In fact, he was trying to help elect Robert A. Taft as the Republican candidate for president back in 1952, when all of a sudden the Democrats favored candidate of Dwight Eisenhower somehow got the Republican nomination and was elected president. And he thought, this doesn't add up right, and eventually formed the John Birch Society to sort of expose the deep state long before the term deep state was coined. But that's what it all boils down to, though, what you said. Less government, less regulation, because it seems like it doesn't matter who's elected, with the Democrats or Republicans, they tend to always favor the expansion of government at the expense of liberty and personal freedom.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's like, why can't we have someone running on a platform of trying to make the government work? And we saw that a little bit with Doge, but I think, the spirit of it was right, but it ended up kind of crashing and burning. But like, I hope that like that idea of holding our government accountable can come back, because I think a lot of people are craving it. And like, ultimately, it's like, do you think people left alone are industrious and create, or do you think that like the government needs to be in their lives? And I think when you're really on the left, which is where I was, you think that like humans left on their own will like be up to no good. And like, you need the government to like somehow help humans from, protect humans from themselves or lift up poor people. I don't know. It's two different ideologies. And like what you're saying, like, personal responsibility and smaller government is now really where I align with, where like ultimately I think that's where you can make the most difference. If you become successful and a responsible member of society within the systems that exist, you can do so much more boundless good and create so much more than if you're just punishing people who are successful, right? Like the other side, the bureaucratic side is, let's just take more money from the people who are doing well. And you're like, okay. So I hope more people figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully they will before November, because there's an election, as you're very aware, you mentioned in your article as well, for the mayorship there in New York City. So what are your thoughts about Zohran Mamdani?
Yeah, so I think he is a very suave character. His social media, I mean, if you go look at his videos, we reported on this extensively, he gets millions of views every post, and I think that's where a lot of eyes are. So I think he's winning over a lot of young people. He's bringing in a lot of new voters who don't necessarily know any better. Like I said, they're not like inoculated against these really bad ideas because they've never actually lived under socialism. They've not lived long enough to see that they fail. So at this point, the competition is also pretty bad because it's not like Adams is the best governor. I mean, sorry, mayor. It's not like Adams is the best mayor. And Cuomo wasn't a good governor of New York State either.
Especially
He
during
passed a
COVID.
lot of, and he passed a lot of like left policies that we're seeing the impact of with around like rent control and stuff like that. So I mean, New York City kind of, I don't know. Do they deserve what's coming to them? Like, I don't, that's like so crass to say, but it's almost like if the voters really want this, like, then let's have it, you know? I don't know. I think that the moderate, normal, smart person, that we need like a new, I don't know, awakening and coming up of new political leaders because it's not yeah, Mamdani is going to win.
Do you
And
think that
also,
the
I don't like that he's
answer?
a Nepo baby. His parents are like very wealthy academics, and one's an academic, one's a filmmaker. And that's where I think Mamdani and AOC are different is because AOC actually was from more of like a first generation immigrant, like working class background. Like she did go to college and like her parents strived really hard to get her there, but like they were like middle class normal people versus Mamdani actually is an elite. And
Yeah,
that
and
is
isn't
a
that
big
interesting?
part about him.
Because the propaganda that many people our age received was it's the wealthy are evil, and
Right.
they're the big fat cats, right? The factory owners, the communist propaganda, right? The big fat factory owner and the little
Yeah,
skinny
of
guy
course.
working the levers, and he's just oppressed by capitalism. But in reality, almost the vast majority of these radical left-wing candidates either come from wealth themselves or they're backed by massive, exorbitant wealth. In fact, there's some books written by Anthony Sutton that you might be interested in if you haven't already heard of them. Of the Bolshevik Revolution, sorry, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution is one
Mm,
of them, about how it was some Wall Street financiers who were bankrolling the Bolshevik Revolution back in 1919. So
wow.
this idea that the rich or the capitalists who are trying to destroy the poor, it's insane. Actually, there's a lot of rich people who are supporting the
Right.
communists, and you have to ask yourselves why is that?
The ideologues. I don't know, but it wasn't Marx. Marx was a very rich, like from really rich family too. All the socialists are always from rich families because if you have enough time to like wax poetic about political theory, like you're rich. Like if you're just a working class person who's just trying to put food on your table, like you're not coming up with these ideas. And I think the thing that comes underneath the foot of all these leftist ideas, and even just like the Democrats in New York and the overregulation and all that, that comes down on the backs of these hardworking people who are maybe small business owners. They have a laundromat, they have a deli, whatever, like first generation immigrants. So it's really unfortunate because, they say like socialism's never really been tried. And that's what they'll say. But it's like libertarianism also has never really been tried. And I think we see like what's
Why don't
going
we
on in
try
Argentina.
that, right?
Yeah, like what's going on in Argentina is a good example of like that you're seeing a lot
Javier
of,
Milei,
yes, he's showing that you can really carve it back, but you have to have such a unique
chainsaw it back to
personality.
be
Yeah,
precise.
exactly. But it didn't even work here, like it worked there. So we'll see what happens. I hope New York doesn't get destroyed, but also I feel like what happens is every generation has to learn this lesson.
Absolutely. Speaking about in New York, you have a lot of small business owners, deli owners, and of course, you have lots of supermarket chains, both local ones and also big chain ones, all throughout New York City. So, and myself being a former New Yorker, when I heard Mamdani on social media talk about opening government-run grocery stores, I
Yeah.
thought that was very odd because New York City probably has more grocery stores than most cities in the country. Per square mile or something like
Right.
that. So what do you think that idea stems from? And is that really resonating with voters? The idea of we want basically a DMV, like your article points out.
Yeah.
Just look at the DMV. Do you think it's really a good idea for New? I mean, are New Yorkers really buying a government-run grocery
Apparently.
store?
I think You don't know. Because people just go, the prices are so high. Like, I'm struggling. And like, it's like the struggle is real. Like, I don't want to be dismissive of the people who are struggling, right? Like, that is real. Like, the pain of people trying to survive with inflation and they've seen their wages, like, buying power go down. Like, that's so real. But then the government run grocery stores, it's like the wrong solution, obviously. And I think people are just more taken with Mamdani's overall air, like the air about him, just the way he comes off and he smiles and he's in the bodegas, like cooking with people. None of his policies make sense because one video he's saying we should get rid of red tape for small business owners. Another one, it's raising the minimum wage to $30 an hour. And you're like, you realize that bodega has to pay their workers $30 an hour, like that's also going to bankrupt them. And then another one is let's have a free grocery store, and you're like, and that's also going to compete with the bodega owner. So like, which one is it? Like, you want to support small businesses, but then you want to undercut them with government-run grocery stores, and then you want to force them to pay their workers an exorbitant amount. So it's kind of just a paste together, throwing anything at the wall to just appeal to the masses. And like, I don't know if you saw, he was very defund the police, and then we had a police officer was killed here last week or 2 weeks ago. It was very sad. Also an immigrant. And Mamdani held a press conference saying, I'm not for defunding the police, la, la, la. So he's like moderating on everything. And like,
Oh, he's just trying to sound more electable because,
yeah, exactly.
November's fast approaching.
Honestly, it's like, I hope that maybe he's actually being honest, because it's like, please don't, like, if you actually get elected and you push all your radical ideas, it's very scary. So maybe he is moderating, like, I'm not in his mind, but like, he is having to walk back some of his craziest stuff, especially from 2020 and all
at least until the election. But
yeah.
Speaking of the election, let's hypothetically say that Mamdani does win and he does defeat, Curtis Sliwa, the Republican candidate, and Mayor Adams running as an independent, and even former Governor Cuomo, who's still running as an independent. Suppose he beats them all and wins the election, and then is able to carry out all the craziest ideas he said before, and maybe some of the ones he's secretly holding till he gets elected. Do you think that the city could survive his policies for 4 years until the next mayoral election? Like, what do you think will be the ramifications of 4 years of Mamdani if he's allowed to be mayor and implement his ideas?
I don't know. I think hopefully he will not be able to implement because of just the way the budgets work. And I think you have to get things approved. And I don't know exactly how it works, but I think the city will survive. New York City has gone through crazy times, right? Where like entire neighborhoods were, they burnt down in riots at one point. You've had the subways and you couldn't go on them and they were covered in graffiti. Like, I remember, when I lived in Soho, when I was down here, I lived in Nolita, the neighborhood. And at one point, all of the buildings that I lived in were in such bad disrepair that they sold them to people for $1. So like, there's been so many seasons of this city. So like, ultimately, I'm bullish on New York long term, but I think if it does happen, I think we're going to see the affordability crisis just get worse because of whatever built-in costs will come from his policies. We'll see a flight of probably very wealthy people who are the highest taxpayers. And so then that will decrease the tax base. And I don't think he's ever run anything in his life. Like he worked for 2 years. And then I think I'm just looking at my coworker, Olivia Reingold's covered him extensively. And I think she said in his reporting, like he didn't show up for half of the votes that he was supposed to show up for when he was on city council. So like he knows how to run a really good campaign and make smooth videos. That's what we know he knows how to do. So I don't know if he could do anything else. Yeah, we'll see.
Like you said, he knows how to smile, but except when it comes to being around NYPD and ICE agency, he loves to scream at those moments. Not so smiley then. But you mentioned his voting record. So here at the New American, we also produce a tool that you might be interested in, and others. It's free for anyone to access and use on thenewamerican.com/freedom-index, or simpler, thefreedomindex.org. And that's we produce these scorecards on every state legislator in the country, also members of the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. And we have one that we produced for State Representative Zohran Mamdani, and he has a 6% score on our index. But anyone watching, especially if you live in New York City or others who live in New York City, you can print these out and hand them out to educate people to say this is what he stands for. This is what he's voted for or voted against, so people can find out.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know I've taken up a lot of your time. So I just want to ask you just last question. So do you have a website or social media where people can go to follow your articles and videos and posts? I mean, where should people go if they want to catch more of your content?
Yeah, so I work at the Free Press, and that our website is thefp.com. So definitely check out the reporting there. There's so many amazing reporters. I'm just in good company, and you should definitely just everyone who sees it loves it. And then my social media is just my name, Lucy Biggers. On Twitter, I'm LL Biggers, but otherwise, I'm like Lucy Biggers on Instagram, TikTok. I get on Substack notes and all that, so should be easy to find. And I'm posting on there just like a lot of my personal content, and then sometimes I do a collab with the Free Press.
Thank you for watching this interview with the New Americans Unrestricted. To watch more of our videos, go to thenewamerican.com. Also, be sure to follow us on Rumble, X, and Facebook. And thank you so much for watching. Take care and God bless.